Welcome, Wine Women and Writing guys. I am so excited to be coming to you from the wilds of Wyoming today, where the sun is shining and snow is melting. I am very, very hopeful that you know who I am after all these episodes. But if you don't, I'm Pamela Fagan Hutchins, and you've reached the show where I like to talk to other writers about their complex, authentic female characters. And today will be no exception. I'll introduce our special guest in just a moment. The bookkeeping. What am I talking about? Bookkeeping, before we start, is that this is a copyrighted production of Authors on the Air Global Radio Network, owned and copyrighted. And so hands off, everybody. This belongs to Pam Stack, who's awesome, by the way. Please catch the other shows in the network. The only announcements I have for you today are first to go out to my website, PamelaFaganHutchins.com, where you can see past shows and you can watch the video casts or listen to the podcasts of all those old and wonderful shows. And while you're there, if you want to check out my two new releases, Scapegoat, fourth in the Patrick Flint series, and Perfect for the little ones in your life, Poppy Needs a Puppy, my first children's book. Totally excited about that. Enough about me, because there's way too much of that already. Instead, let's talk about our guest today. And this is my right, your left, I don't know, the person the show, Diana Giovinazzo and The Woman in Red.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you. We were both sharing that we're sleepy, and I am pumping coffee unapologetically as we go today. Just as far as I can go.
Very much so.
And now you're out on. I'm in the kind of the left center of the country, but you're way out there on the left, on the west.
I am. Yes, I am in the world of fruits and nuts, as they like to say it. So yeah, I'm just south of Los Angeles in that area.
Awesome. Is that a native thing for you, or are you from somewhere else in the country?
No, I'm originally from New York. I was born in central New York. I was born and raised just outside of Utica. And I moved out here when I was about 18 years old. My dad lives out here. And I've been coming out for school, like actually not necessarily school, but for summer trips. You know, I go out and come out and see my dad and my stepmom. And then, you know, once you go from the dead winter and you go to California and where it's nice and warm, it's like, I'm going to be screwed up. I'm never staying in New York again. I'm going to be in California.
I hear you. So with your interest in The Woman in Red, in Anita, in history, is that something that dates back to those early years, that 18-year-old you that moved out to California, or is this a passion of yours that's arisen later in life?
A little bit of a mix of both, really, when it comes down to it. I was researching my family history. Obviously, I'm Italian, and I was very curious about my family. My Italian grandparents died when I was very young, so I didn't really get to ask them those questions about what it was like for them, you know, in Italy, what was it like for them growing up. And it was my great-grandparents who were the ones who immigrated. And so I never got to hear their stories. And so I was very curious about it, and I started researching about my family. And I actually have a background in sociology and anthropology. That's where I got my degree in. And I was also a history nerd. I almost became a history major, but I ended up in sociology instead. And I think it really paid off for me. I think in more ways in sociology than in history. Not to anger anybody who are history majors, who are historians. I love historians. They are amazing. I need them so much. So when I was, following my grandparents' story and wanting to know, how'd they come here? What was the story about it? It ended up turning into, well, why? Why did they come here? One came in 1913 and the other one came in 1915. And I want to know, what brought them to the United States. Immigration is not just a flash in a pan kind of thing. And you're not like, oh, yeah, I'm just going to pick up and just move to another country where nobody knows me. And so I really wanted to know more about them. And my dad and I were talking about family history. We're talking about, Italian history. And he was like, you should really look into the Garibaldis. You'd be very interested in Anita. I think you'd really like her and their story. And initially I was like, well, I mean, she's Brazilian. She's not,
Yeah, I'm Italian.
yeah, exactly. And he was like, just pick up a book, talk to me about it later. And from the moment I picked up a book, it was like this whole new world opened up to me. She was amazing. She was wonderfully sarcastic. I really love that about her. Yeah, and she was just so fierce and such a rebel that I fell in love, and I always wanted to be a writer, which is so weird because you go from history to sociology to anthropology, and then all of a sudden you're like, I wanted to be a writer at the same time too, and I was like, well, let me go ahead and give this a try, get this book started, and then the rest is history, I suppose, as they say.
I think what is kind of cool about this, listening to your story of how you came to be fascinated by her, is that you were fascinated with an immigration story.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, hers is in part an immigration story. It's about adopting another land. And so besides her absolute kick-ass, sarcastic, rebel personality, there's that. And so let's take even a step back and let's make sure that all y'all that are going to be watching this, all y'all with Texas background, understand who Anita is and what this book is. So give us your elevator pitch about.
Oh, absolutely. So Anita was born in southern Brazil. She was a gaucho. And for those of you who are not familiar with what gauchos are, kind of think of the, American cowboy, but in my opinion, cooler. And they're trained horseback riders. She was an excellent horseman. She roped cows, the bit, and they would be out in the wilds of Brazil, and that's what she was raised with. That's what she did. And then she was married off at an early age, and then she ended up, that ended, thankfully, for all of us involved, and she met Garibaldi, who was a mercenary from Italy, and they fell in love, and they had this sordid affair, and she fought alongside him in a war in Brazil called the Ragamuffin War, which I just love that name for a war, don't you? Yeah. And then she went from Brazil to Uruguay, and she fought there too. And then from Uruguay, she went to Italy, right at this cusp of their unification, and she became a fighter there as well. And oftentimes she did these things while pregnant, which was just astounding.
Some of the stories about her being a badass and pregnant were I just pictured myself back when I was pregnant and whining, and like, oh, I don't feel good, and I just want to feed her. It's like, no, she wasn't saying that. She was getting out there and getting it done. I'm sure she felt bad too. She was amazing.
Yes. I mean, the stories, the one story, it's not really a spoiler, where she's 8 months pregnant, falls off her horse, and gets captured. And they're like, hey, by the way, your husband may or may not be dead. You don't know. It's just so astounding to me that she was able to hold herself together and not fall apart and still fight for this.
It was amazing. And I'm not Italian. My background is Irish immigrants. And so for me, this was all a new story. It was a name I knew, but it was a new story and a chance to fall in love from a very fresh perspective. And I really, when I first started reading it, and I was thinking, okay, yeah, I can start to see who this chick is. But I just absolutely thought she was fearless, just socially fearless, absolutely without regard to her gender, without regard to the fact that she was married to a guy that was pretty darn tough himself, not scared of him at all, just not scared of anything. Immigrated, whatever. She did it all. And it was really inspiring. Good person, right?
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, she really was. And I feel like with Garibaldi, they were a perfect match for each other when it came down to it. When you look at what they wrote about each other and how they really loved each other, just unconditionally. And before he met Anita, he was like, I want to have a wife. I want to have somebody that I can come home to. And, he was a bit of a philanderer prior to her coming along. It's that story of the bad boy turns good for the right woman kind of story with him. And, when he met her, it was just like, this is the one. She's the one who just kind of really pulled everything together. And it was really funny with doing the research. The other guys that were around were like, are you sure, Garibaldi? Are you sure about this one? They weren't, in the very beginning, they weren't so sure about her. But then by the end,
it was like the cuddly stay-at-home type that they probably pictured when he said, I want a wife. She was like, I've got my gun. Let's go.
yeah, exactly. I mean, and you look at like John Griggs and Ruthie, who I love them, and I really wish I could put more of their story into the book as well. But she was, very much, Ruthie, stayed by the campsite. She didn't go off and fight. She was there for John and was a, backup for him. She did everything she could for him, but she didn't go fight. It was Anita who was the one who was out doing the fighting, doing all these things. She wouldn't be left behind.
Yeah. And still to have kids, to be creative. One of the things that I liked a lot about how you introduced us to her is that you really did show us that she didn't do things blithely. She may have been courageous and a risk taker, but she understood what she was getting into. She was scared. She had her fears. She had her hurts. She had her other loves, her children, etc. And you got all of that with her, so that she wasn't just a woman with a sword and a charging into battle. She was a woman that you could relate to and think, okay, she's a little braver than me. I could do more.
Yeah, I don't have kids, so I couldn't really personally play with the kid aspect. I go back and talk to my friends who have kids and be like, so this is a situation. What are your thoughts? Let's talk this out. But like there were things where I remember I was hiking and I was going up a really steep hill and I was like, I can't do this. And then I had to stop and think, okay, well, Anita would laugh at me right now. There was a scene where they're like in the middle of like this steep hill, the river's running through. It's terrible for them. And I'm like a baby. I don't know how much we can swear in this, so I'm trying not to. So please excuse me. So I'm trying to be this, not be this baby and not climb up this hill to a summit while she can do these things and I couldn't. And so that really is something I really tried to take with me is her bravery, just kind of, encapsulate that as much as I could.
I think when you started her life, you were mentioning it earlier, the gaucho life, and it was cool, but it was hard. It was very hard work. You were in the elements, you were working with large animals that could kill you, you had to be tough, you had to think fast, you had to be brave. But all of these things would be something that really uniquely prepared her. As compared to me sitting in my house with, the comforts of modern life, that there seems to be less that prepares us for that kind of physical challenge today. Whether or not we do the challenge might just be, we just might never know because we didn't. What do you think of it? So when you sword, when you seal it with fire or whatever. I didn't have that as a kid, but she was ready for the challenge when it came to her.
Oh, absolutely. And when you go and look at the gauchos today, like if you go on, I know Amazon has a bunch of documentaries on them, and you can see them in the Patagonia areas where you see them, and you see more of the gaucho farmsteads, and you watch how they act. You see these people who just are part of the rugged wilderness. And part of the story there that is just so fascinating, and how they ride, how they can rope cattle, and you also get a sense of how impoverished they can be. There's one that I was watching where you have an old man who lives in this little hut, and his family comes in once a year. They go out, they go get the cattle and do their business, and then he's still there in the hut even after they're gone. And that was the kind of world that she lived in Brazil.
And often the gratitude they felt for what they had that they had the life that they did and that they had anything at all. And, being able to strip ourselves of a modern perspective and go back and see that it's illuminating. It's difficult. And yet again, it uniquely prepared her for what you have to do as somebody that goes from war to war, where you are often freezing to death or, being tortured by insects or starving or, whatever. And she was amazing in that way. Makes me not want to complain about mosquitoes. So now that you have this book out, are you working on another?
I am another amazing Italian woman. Her name is Maria Carolina Charlotte, and in the book, I think I talked a little bit about the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies. Yes. If you recall, it came up, yes, and she was the queen of the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies prior to the Woman in Red, and she was a I have not had enough coffee yet today. Habsburg princess. There we go. Here we go. Hi, my name's Diana. I'm a wonderful read my book.
Don't listen to me. Can't talk. Can't write.
Exactly. So she was a Habsburg Archduchess, and famously, her sister was Marie Antoinette. And so she has this amazing story where I don't want to give too much away, but there were 3 sisters before her that were supposed to marry Ferdinand of the Two Sicilies, and each one of them died, and she was the next to be sent off to him. And she gets into this kingdom where you have a king who just has no interest in being a king. And just literally there are stories where he's in a council meeting, everybody's around, and he's like, my wife knows everything. Talk to her, and then gets up and leaves. And she's left to just deal with this all on her own. And that's, her story. And then she's stressed out about her sister, Marie Antoinette. And Marie Antoinette, they were so close. They were raised as twins. They were 2 years apart. They were so close. And so she's, fighting against the French and Napoleon. She's one of the few women who actually stood up to Napoleon.
Wow.
And he came in and they invaded the Two Sicilies as well. And so it's a great story. And she's another really fierce woman. And that's one of the things I love about, his story is women, fierce women that we never hear about. We hear so little about these women in history that, we get these women coming through, women like Anita, women like Maria Carolina Charlotte, and we don't really get to know them as much because they're not the ones getting to make those decisions.
Yeah. And what grabs me immediately about her story is that I can't imagine anything about how she was raised would have been specifically to be here, take the place and get no credit of the king. Yeah. Although her sister was pretty incredible too, Marie Antoinette. But, to just be thrown into that and think, okay, I can't go back and eat bonbons. I have to step up because my husband is a loser. People are counting on him, and therefore they have to be able to count on me, even though they're not necessarily my people first. It's just what a complex role to find yourself in, and responsibility to take on. And yet, like you say, in the end, whose name do we know? King
Exactly.
Guys. I can't just call myself, but still. Oh my goodness. So you're working on that. And now does that have a release date, or is this more just we're working through it?
It's tentative. We're looking at spring of 2022 is what we're looking at.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Now, when you read for pleasure, is it historical fiction as well? Is this kind of your jam all the way around?
It's a mix, really. When I have my moments, I like to go historical fiction. That's where I usually go. But I also have a podcast, which is very similar. similarly titled.
I saw that when you first broke, and I was like, how in the world did I not know that existed when others on the air named this show? But
yeah, Wine, Women, and Words.
Yeah.
With
We have that same groove going on.
we do, yeah. We're like sister podcasts here.
So,
Yeah. So, my good friend who's in it as well, she's very into historical fiction, or no, I'm sorry, not historical fiction, and she's into fantasy. She killed me for going, I'm fantasy. So I'll get fantasy from her, historical fiction from me, and then we also get whatever, genre happens to come up.
yeah.
We have such a wide range, so I end up reading very widely.
It's the same thing with the podcast. It's, you talk to female writers about female characters, but it's not genre specific. And so I find myself reading things that I might not have picked up because it's my thing, but I've really been blessed because it's been a wonderful experience. And I would include your book in that. I don't know if I would have said I want to read a book of historical fiction about Anita Garibaldi, but when I got the email from your publicist with what the book was about, I was like, oh, hell yeah. Oh, hell yeah. So I really enjoyed it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
I hope it does fantastic for you. And I will look forward to the next one. So you guys go out and pick up your copy of The Woman in Red. And I promise that you will enjoy it. And I just, people are leaving comments. I love the book. So I'm not listening to your video because I know she wants to be careful not to give herself spoilers. That's
okay. Very good. We didn't give away too many spoilers, I think.
Good. We did good. And so you guys be sure to go run out and check out the past and upcoming shows, PamelaFaganHutchins.com, and pick up a good book. It will help you forget about what may or may not be going on in the world. If you find it stressful, I highly recommend it. Everyone take care.
Bye.
Thanks. Oh, Diana.
Thanks.